Let's begin with a word of prayer. Holy and gracious God, thank you for this day that you've made. Thank you for the work we have done. Thank you for the work that is left to do. We pray that you would be in this place with us in our conversations, in our questions, in our searching for answers together, and ask that in our discussion we would draw closer to you and closer to one another. It's in your Son, Jesus' holy name that I pray. Amen. I'm grateful for all the folks that are gathered here this evening to talk about the Special Finance Team report. And that's about all I will say. David is going to get us started here. And then I would ask if you would use the raise hand feature on Zoom. We don't have too many people here tonight, so I think we'll be okay, but that will help us kind of figure out who's who. And this is not a Robert's Rules of Order type situation, so we'll keep it as chill as we can. But with that, I would love to turn it over to David, and thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Josh, and big thank you to the Mission Council and the Board of Trustees for all of their really great help, and the Presbytery staff. People have just been fantastic in helping our work group do its assigned task. I do want to and will be long time indebted to the work group. Bill Brownfield is on the call tonight, so big thank you to Bill. Other members might be able to join, but there's also Karen Alleman from Madison. There's Sam Kirkton from Kirk O'Cliff, and Carol Martin from Tuckahoe. And I'm David Forney. I'm one of the pastors at First Presbyterian Church in Charlottesville. And the committee asked if I would moderate that group, and was glad to do that. I have an assumption that folks have had a chance to read through the material. Maybe I at least hopefully enough of the summary of our work, but hopefully indeed the entire policy. The document that we ended up putting together, I think, was some 31 pages. That is not a deliberateness to be long-winded, but a real desire to be as comprehensive as we could be. So I want to say a little bit about our own process. We began our work in December of 2024, and we wanted to try and get as much kind of information as we could. So we looked at all what we thought were the most relevant documents that were there. This includes things like the bylaws and the manual of administrative operations. The one that's important to note is this resource management policy. It is the policy that the Presbytery approved beginning in 1999. And there are aspects of that policy that are, well, we assume all of the aspects of that policy are still operative in one way or another. They were revised. The last revision we could find was in 2004. But there are financial procedures that are also captured in the Manual of Administrative Operations. We also looked at the financial review statements from 2018 onward. We had good looking at the documents and conversations with RBC Wealth Management, who the Presbytery has been working with, and Jeff Chapman, I think, has been working with the Presbytery. Don't quote me on this, but it's at least 2 decades. I think it's 22 years now, and so Jeff could not be more kind of helpful to us. And then we also wanted to have conversations with people who have been kind of most involved with the POJ's finances within the last several years at least. Cindy has been the POJ finance consultant for over 2 decades. She's retiring or is just about to be retired from that with the POJ. But Cindy, of course, was instrumental in being sure we had all of the kind of most up-to-date information. We also, and you see the list of other people we had conversations with, and then finally we did send out a survey to all of the minister members as well as the clerks of session, so that we could try and get as much kind of input from the POJ as before we begin to try and do our work. Come back to the resource management policies. The RMP is what it's been termed in the presbytery for quite a while, because that really provided the basis for our work. But we also then in the policy tried to pull in other policies that are within the presbytery, particularly from the manual of operations, and also fiscal policies that the POJ has passed, and we did not try and want to change those policies, but more get them in alignment with a full kind of a document. And then if there were some things that were either against best practices in budgeting or nonprofit leadership, we tried to adjust those. But then also found some gaps, and so we tried to fill in those gaps. The real perspective of the group is that that our budgeting work is this annual discipline that helps us be able to do good mission work in planning. And so we thought that the best offering we could give as a work group would be to try and have those processes and policy in place, so that then the work of discernment of the presbytery could take place. That would some of the deep pieces of that is transparency, which we think helps us to be able to have the discernment of the presbytery year after year, and that transparency and the clearness of the policy would then help improve our decision making. So we then took and worked through the policy many times, lots of combing through it, lots of good conversation, lots of options or perspectives offered, and what you have before you was fully endorsed unanimously by every member of the committee. And so it is our hope that this is going to function in this way for the presbytery. So I'm going to now stop my kind of background about these things, and I am glad to try and answer any questions you have. And if they get a little too in places that either I don't know that the committee has talked about or we don't have a good answer, I'm going to take them down, and we'll want to try and get those to you. But hopefully we can address any kind of questions, or would love your perspectives, positive or concerns you might have.
Thanks so much, David. Anybody have a question, a thought? John Garrett, I see your hand. Why don't you make sure you unmute yourself and then ask away.
Yes. What was the toughest nut y'all had to crack?
That's a lovely question. toughest nut we had to crack. I would probably have to say that we spent the most time on section 5, which is the investment management section. And then I would say second to that would have been section 3, which is the budgeting process. Section 5 was probably more of a theological and biblical conversation, as well as getting our own selves up to speed of best practices within nonprofits, particularly within churches, and what the PCUSA does, for instance, with its foundation. Section 3 was more wanting to be sure that we have clarity about our own understandings of processes, because we really did not want to be starting from kind of a scratch template and not take our current practices as a presbytery into account. So we really tried to align with where the presbytery has been doing these things as best we could, but then realized for various reasons we would need to add more detail. And this is back to the transparency issue.
Yeah. Well, those who know me, my favorite topic, because I'm a member of a very small church.
Mhm.
And I do appreciate you reaching out in the surveys and the opportunities that I think we had. But and listening to y'all do your work. But my question is, how did the small churches, where did they come into the whole picture? Or did you not treat them any different, which I can understand?
Yeah. So the I believe that the policy itself is neutral, dispassionate about any congregation size.
Yeah.
What we hope is, and by the way, there were small church members on this group. So we really welcomed and appreciated their, asking and bringing the questions of that, from that, at least from their churches.
Right.
I would say that my hope would be that this structure of the budgeting process and the sustainability and the kind of fiduciary responsibility of the presbytery would then allow for the presbytery within this structure to be more attentive and connecting to the various needs that are within our presbytery, not the least of our small congregations. And so we hope that everybody's voice has a better kind of opportunity through the budgetary process to be in front of the presbytery, rather than a process that is either little understood or in some ways that you get frustrated because you don't know how, you don't even know what questions to be asking, for instance, when a budget's being approved.
Thank you. And I do appreciate your response.
Good. Okay.
David, I wonder if I could, you mentioned fiduciary responsibility.
Yeah.
And in section 2, there's a mention of the presbytery holding fiduciary responsibility for the financial well-being of its congregations and ministries.
Yeah.
I wonder if you would just speak to that a little bit, and what is the presbytery's responsibility to congregations in particular? Um,
Well,
like, is there a responsibility for their financial health, or
oh,
how do you see that playing out?
um, well, so I might come around this a little bit in a awkward way, but let me say first off, this policy is for the way in which the presbytery's own budget is formed, implemented, reviewed, and executed. Uh, it is not any kind of a template or roadmap in any way for a local congregation. Though I think that the principles that are here, uh, because they're best practices with the best accounting practices, but also nonprofits, is applicable to it. Now, I don't think a church necessarily needs a 31-page financial policy. I would say that some of the principles that are here, I've seen in the congregations that I have served, and have found them to be, a helpful way. Now here's the roundabout. The committee really had an interesting and wonderful conversation of what do we mean when we say the presbytery. And we had this long kind of interesting conversation from a polity perspective. The presbytery is the congregations. I mean, that is, but it's not just the congregations. We have minister members that are serving in validated ministries that aren't with the local congregation. So it's more than just the congregations, but it is the congregations. And so we and we know that the ways in which the presbytery can be supportive is through its work, and that gets reflected in financial ways. Not 100%. There's a lot of things that we do that are non-monetary, and monetary work that we do in our local in our households and local congregations and within the presbytery needs to be a faithful execution. You probably saw the in the document the word alignment. That was an important word for us because we're really wanting to have this the execution of this policy, if it gets approved, to be in alignment with what God's call and mission is to the POJ and her congregations. And that is a moving target all the time. God is doing a new thing. Do we not perceive it? Isaiah will ask us. And so we wanted the policy to be able to be nimble, or the capacity that the presbytery could be about its work of discernment and not be frustrated, confused about, wait, I don't understand how we're doing this, or where this money came from, or why we would do that on the financial kind of workplaces. So if that gets lined out, then our hope is that actual discernment of, okay, POJ, what do our smaller congregations need? And let's have that conversation and figure out how we can be having that be our conversation than some of the frustrating and difficult conversations we've been having as a presbytery as of late.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Yeah, John?
Yeah, I'm John Groats. I'm using my wife's laptop, so mine wouldn't get Zoom. I don't want to show my ignorance because I did look at the report, but I've been busy in my own right, Presbytery wise.
Sure.
So, uh, what mistakes have been made in the past 5 years budget wise, and how have they been corrected?
Um, the committee did not, we had to have a real clarity about this from the very beginning. That the committee did not understand its task given by the presbytery to offer or to do an autopsy report on what had taken place. So you'll notice, for instance, we had no conversations with people on the personnel committee. We did not have interviews or conversations with any of the three most recent presbyters. And so what we saw was some gaps in our own policies about sustainability. So I think we would clearly say that we heard the presbytery say we do not have a sustainable financial policy, and we want this group to think about what a financial sustainable policy would be. We even had that title for just a little bit, that this is the POJ sustainability finance policy. And then after we read that a couple of meetings, we said, okay, that doesn't make sense to have sustainability in the title of it. And we returned to what the presbytery's already named it, resource management policy. But sustainability, John, I think it's clearly the presbytery's diagnosis, hence this group. And so then we had long conversations. Well, what does sustainable look like and mean? And we think the first step is to have the policy in place. And then, as the presbytery lives with that policy, that we deeply believe that the presbytery will have a sustainable model to use. And part of that is the policy will need to be amended. So we have put in there how it gets amended, because we have no illusion that this is perfect. And, we could just keep this for the next, for the next 25 years, which is where we've been. We would rather have it, we work with it. We see where it has strengths. We recognize the deficiencies or adjustments that may take place. And we do those all with this desire to have it serve in our discernment. I don't know if that was as long-winded, John, but I hope that got at what you were asking. Please follow up if I missed it, though.
I really should just be here to listen because I've done so little research on it. So I really came to learn. So thank
Okay,
you, David.
great. Yeah, you're welcome.
Who else has questions, reflections? Oh, I see Crystal's hand, her physical hand.
I wanted to circle back to Josh's question about the presbytery's fiduciary responsibility to the congregations, because I don't feel like it was fully answered, at least from my reading of what the document says. Because I think it's an important thing to clarify of looking, because we do have congregations where there's questions of congregation financial, I'd say survivability and ability to be able to continue to support their buildings and things like that. And so with what your document has, it leads me to believe that we have a responsibility to follow up and to check in on these congregations. And as someone currently serving on the Commission on Ministry, it does give me concern of going, okay, are we supposed to be checking folks' budgets and following up on this and having concerns? Or are we just talking about how we have to be financially responsible because congregations are depending on us to be financially responsible? Does that make sense?
That made total sense, Crystal. And I kind of wished I'd answered it that way. we are not in any way calling on this, the COM or any other part of the presbytery to be requiring budgets to be sent in or what the congregations have to be doing. We would want to say that and I think the COM is doing this in a really nice way, at least in my experience of it in 2025 with our liaison. She's just been fantastic. Rhonda has been checking in these kind of ways. And if a COM liaison checks in with the congregation and says, we really are struggling with some financial kind of questions, or we would like to, is there some expertise within the presbytery that could help us think about these things, or we'd like to, develop a policy. But if asked, then I would hope our presbytery could say, absolutely, we have resources, we would want to help you, but it would be the congregation asking for that kind of support, rather than the presbytery showing up to say, you gotta, do these things.
Oh, that's perfect. And I appreciate that. I also appreciate hearing that your liaison is reaching out and doing a good job in that regard. We
She's
have
doing
been
great.
trying. We've been trying. It's been a process of rebuilding those kinds of
Yeah,
relationships. So I'm glad to hear.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, okay. So in alignment with that, Crystal, there's that word again. We have a real hope that this policy will provide a way for a building of trustworthiness within our presbytery. We recognize from our own experiences that is not as at the level we would like it to be. And we think trustworthiness gets built up by good stewardship, by transparency, by knowing, okay, here's how these things work. Now, we might have a different way we would want it to work. Great. Well, let's have that conversation, but let's not have it be confusing, opaque, and all of a sudden, well, I don't understand how this is going on or how this happened. The majority of the revenues for the POJ continues to be congregational giving. And so we as a presbytery, I think, owe it as a fiduciary responsibility to let our congregations know we, a presbytery, have our house in order. We are doing good alignment work with God's desire for this presbytery, and we can say, see, here it is. Here is how here's how we're doing that, and have our congregation say, that's great. Now I understand why we're giving this this pledge to the presbytery every year, and it's doing this good work.
Others who'd like to chime in?
I see a
John
hand,
Flournoy,
John.
are you? Yes, please. And we are a small enough group, folks, that if there's a lull in silence and you want to jump in, I won't be offended.
I'm looking at a different area than what you've been talking about. Basically, investment management in the C area, investment objectives. And my background is an accountant.
Mine is not, John.
I understand that, and I understand that we're going to be on different wavelengths, but I'm going to try to bring forth what I'm thinking here.
Okay.
We're talking about in paragraph 3 that we're going to be drawing down from our investments 4 or 5%, and that I have no problem with. And the 12-month average, I don't have a quarrel with. All that makes some sense. But what is this investment portfolio? Right now, the presbytery has restricted itself with a ton, maybe 3 dozen various funds. where it's gonna use the money for this or that or the other thing? Maybe. Money's gonna come in from, I guess some of it comes from churches who have left us and we put the money aside. Is all this money aside now gonna be lumped as one portfolio?
So that's a great question, John, and thank you for it. We really had to try and get our heads locked in the difference between restricted funds and designated funds. And so from that, we started developing a glossary to try and be as clear about how terms get used within the whole policy. A restricted fund is one that the presbytery itself restricts. A designated fund is one of which the donor makes the gift, decided how that money can be spent.
Right,
And when the presbytery receives a designated gift, it cannot spend that money for something that is outside of the designation of the gift. Now, to the investment that we're talking about, these investment funds, those funds are what is the money that is sitting with RBC. And those monies are what we're talking about with regard to this investment objective. So the liquidity, the cash, if you will, that is sitting for a designated fund is not invested in the same way. It is in cash, so that when the presbytery says, "Oh, we have this money that has been designated to do this missional work," it is clear from what the need is and from what the donor gave, and that cash just goes to that. The investment side of this is it's unrestricted, and this is how the presbytery in recent years has been closing the budget shortfalls. And we do not believe that is a sustainable model, nor is it transparent or has longer discernment than what the committee felt comfortable with. So what the investment then does is that money is set to be doing this work, at which then we have a draw from it every year. And from that draw, the money can be better managed because it's clear what the draw is going to be. So the investment manager can be clear about what their need they're going to do. They've put a lot more money, a lot less money in equities and a lot more money into liquidity because the presbytery has been drawing these larger sums from it. And so they want to be able to be a good financial manager. If it's clear that they're going to have this annual draw between 4% and 5%, then the presbytery also in its budgetary process then knows what that is anticipated to be. It gets calculated in January, but that it can be pretty close to what the real revenue is there. So the presbytery can then do better fiduciary planning and work for what the presbytery wants to be doing its next year.
okay, I'm still not clear. Restricted funds, I think, are a very small part of what we have invested.
Correct.
I mean, there's been not very much money given by a donor that we have to abide by that terms from his will or wherever it was.
Right. But there are those line items that are within our budget that we then have said, okay, well, we're going to fund this out of that line. that designated line. You're right, John. It's a low dollar amount. The portfolio we're talking about now is about 4.5 million.
Right, and in the designated amount, as I followed it, the presbytery has designated a whole lot of that for various activities over the years. Some even recently. And it just seems to me that we're really doing away with all those designations.
What we're doing away with, I want to be sure that you and I are at least using the same terms. The designated cannot be done away with unless the donor says, yes, you can spend that differently than the original gift. And
No,
you're
wait a
right,
minute,
John.
wait a minute. The designated are designated by the presbytery.
If it's designated by the presbytery, then hold on, John. I want to be sure that I am giving, so in the,
Okay.
Okay, so you're right, John. The designated funds are the ones that the presbytery has designated for this or to that. But but the presbytery can change that designation anytime it wants because it's its designation.
Right.
And so this policy says that those designations by the presbytery are being designated in this new way where the presbytery will spend that percent draw to go to the things that presbytery in the fall of each year votes on for them to go to. And the policy designates how that draw is spent. The majority of the draw, if not all of the draw, will go to ministry programs, which is what they were designated for in more kind of specific ways. So we really wanted to capture the spirit of the presbytery's desire that these funds, particularly from congregations that are then no longer part of our presbytery and the property is sold, is used for these kind of ministry uses.
Well, it just seems to me that it's going to be very difficult for a designated fund that's got $20,000 in it. How are you going to do that next year? How are you going to allocate the 4 or 5%?
The 4 or 5% is going to be is embedded within the budgetary process.
Right.
So, and so the board of trustees, because the investment side sits under the board of trustees hat, not the mission council hat. The board of trustees will, through their investment committee, will say, we propose a 4.5% draw. Let's say in July, they do it in July each year. They say, okay, for 2026, we think we want to do a 4.5% draw. Then we take the prior 12 quarters and we calculate what that draw would be. Now it's going to get finalized because you've got to get the third quarter and the fourth quarter in the current year before the actual calculation happens. But that draw then comes into the revenue line of income. And the presbytery must spend that income on revenues, I shouldn't say income, revenues they must spend on their mission programs. In other words, they cannot use it for salaries or for building maintenance on the presbytery's office. Now, there's an exception to this in that the trustees could recommend a 4.5% draw, of which 1% of that draw goes to administrative. And then 3.5 would go into the programs. That would be the extreme example. We do not want to ordinarily be supporting our administrative side of the house with this draw. We want the draw to be going to our ministry programs. And these are the things that we've already been talking a little bit tonight, like for instance, revitalization of small congregations. That's a great one for us to be ministry doing, or campus ministry or Camp Hanover. Those are on that program side of the house. Yet our presbytery staff is doing program things, and so we said, you know, there's a gray area in there, and so we wanted to be able to allow the current people to make those decisions and not have us preempt those kind of decisions. So then that $20,000 question, John, the group could say, you know, you've ordinarily supported us with $20,000 a year. We would like to request that for our continued work. And then the presbytery gets to decide, does that make sense or not? But it's not a locked in for that particular group. It's got to be annually that the presbytery makes their decision, because we're not going to be the same presbytery 5 years from now as we aren't the same presbytery we were 5 years ago.
Okay. I'm still concerned about these funds that we have. With taking in the current year $93,000 from one of our funds and funding new worshiping communities. Now, is that fund exempt from this 4.5%, 4 to 5%? How does that work?
If that fund that you're looking at, John, is a fund that is a designated fund by the presbytery, you are correct that that designation is no longer there. A previous presbytery designated that fund in all good faith. What we're saying is that that designation is not a lock in perpetuity.
Well, that would then lead to next year for 26. We've got $93,000 in new worshiping communities that isn't going to be there until we put it back through the 4.5%, 4 to 5%. And those folks are going to be real unhappy. I mean, that's what I'm seeing. If we go here and we're taking what amounts to about $200,000 in interest income that will go into the budget, this 93 has to be part of that and not separate from it.
I'm not entirely clear about that, John.
Okay.
In the sense that congregational giving can be going to that as well.
Oh,
we
yes.
could be above. I would hope we would be above than just what is the draw. But what we are saying is that the draw at least has to be there, and that if we as a presbytery are living beyond our means on the administrative side of the house, that we're not taking from these investment funds, the principal, to fund the budget shortfall, which ultimately ends the new worshiping communities anyway. But we did an analysis where that the programs that are there are pretty close in alignment with what this draw would be. We took the 2025 budget and we actually ran the numbers hypothetically to say, okay, so if this is our draw, what does this actually look like for this budget? And I think we had a $4,000 deficit by using current POJ numbers, and that's funding the things that are in 2025 right now. Now, we also, I must say, we clearly understand that the support of our presbytery administratively right now is under budget. We have great people that are doing great work for us, but it is their goodness that is making that work this way for 2025. But John, I do not want to argue. This is not this is not going to be pleasant when we actually have to live within this this transparency and this budgeting. The presbytery is going to have to make some really hard decisions if it wants to, do this work of what the policy is recommending.
All right.
We believe, though, that that's not this group's work, but that's the whole presbytery's work. And the only way it can do it is by a transparency of a policy that then gives the presbytery the full information, and the presbytery says, yeah, worshiping communities are so very important, and these ministries are not as important, so we can't afford to do those ministries at this time. I don't know how that conversation has to happen.
Okay, the other problem I see is in number 7, where we're talking about allocation of real property sale proceeds. Not that I object to where you're placing it, but the idea of placing it. That we're gonna put 50% into stewardship, 25% into resurrection, and 15 into reparation action. Now we're setting up funds again.
Yeah.
That we're gonna tell ourselves that we're gonna put 15% of whatever we sold Mechanicsville for, or whoever, into this
Yes.
little fund that's gonna kind of sit out there doing nothing. Oh, no, we're gonna use that for a few things here. But it starts falling outside that 4 to 5% investment.
So friends, we are in section 7,
Right.
Subsection C. And this is a policy that the presbytery approved in 2023. So we did not change it. This isn't our idea.
Okay.
We did not weigh in whether this is good or bad. We just thought, oh, this is the presbytery's policy on this real property sales proceeds. And so we thought it was really important that it be housed in a policy in a clear kind of way. So that's why it is there. But it's a nice example, John. The C number 1 is that the presbytery would put 50% into the investment fund. So that 4.5% would then be coming off of that 50% in perpetuity. So we're going to have more monies because of the sale of this property to be doing ministry programs going forward. The resurrection is a designated account that is going to continue to support these worshiping communities. I think that I would suggest, we did not want to get too deep into it, but that the Mission Council sets up a RFP, request for funding, and that people apply to the presbytery to say, hey, we'd like some resurrection fund for doing these kind of things. You'll also see that there's launching new programs, supporting small churches. But those are, John, you were right. They are designated funds that then I hope the presbytery in its transparency is going to be able to be doing this good work throughout our presbytery.
Yeah, I just think we ought to do away with that and put it all in a lump sum and have it come back out through the budget process.
That
Okay.
would require a vote from presbytery on the floor of presbytery. This is not
Absolutely.
something that we can change right here with this report. This is a vote of presbytery to change.
Right, and the committee was not trying to second guess the Presbytery about the clear financial processes that they were trying to use. We are trying to use.
I understand. I just, as a financial guy, it'd be easier to get it straight and then come through the budget. And I think Crystal's point is it probably won't come through the budget if we don't do it here.
The Presbytery in 2023 wanted to designate these monies in this way. And so
Right.
it has.
Yeah, I designated $750,000 for the budget too, and we were wrong there, but that's another story.
So I do
We've
see
not done
two
things
hands.
always right, but we try to fix them, don't we?
Yeah. So I do see two hands raised. John Garrett, I saw your hand come up first, and then Gordon.
Mine is on procedure, and it deals with how these percentages came about. In this case, as I recall, it was put forth by the Board of Trustees and agreed to by the Presbytery. Anybody recall or confirm that?
I see thumbs up from Carrie Foster there. So I think that is
That's all I need. I'm good now.
okay. Great. Thanks, John. Gordon, would you like to jump in? It's good to, interact with you.
It's good to be able to interact. Thank you.
Yeah.
David, thank you and the work group for all the work and all the detail and appreciate everything that's there and the attempt to go much deeper than the task force was able to last year. A couple of questions sort of following up on where John started in the investment land. And most of these are for just clarity. The manual of operations for the Presbytery under the trustees section refers to one of the standing subcommittees as the investment advisory group. And the report talks about the investment subcommittee. Are those the same thing?
They are the same thing.
Okay. Second, on those, who's on that committee? What's that made up of, that subcommittee?
Since it is an advisory subcommittee of the trustees, the trustees are the ones who would appoint people to be on that.
Are they appointing them from within the trustees, or are they appointing trustees and members at large kind of thing?
Currently, they're doing both. Go ahead, Carrie.
Gordon and others, that particular committee met not too awful long ago, and I'll have to admit, I only remember Dan Jorginger was one of but the other two people that were on the committee with him were not, by my best memory, trustees or mission council people. They were other individuals. And they submitted a report back to the finance group of their findings about the RBC. They looked at it, but and in my limited time on mission council, they have met, it seems to me, at least once a year. So but it is out of sight.
Yeah, and Dan indicated in the interviews with him that has 3 people on it. He clearly believes that it should have 5 people, and the trustees should be, getting it into a larger kind of a group. But this is not a deciding making group. What they're doing is trying to be coordinating well with RBC, but their recommendation comes to the Board of Trustees, of which the recommendation comes through for what is the percent draw, as well as the investment policy that is annually reviewed with RBC's help, but or whoever our financial manager would be.
Thanks, David. One last question on the trustees. Did your work group discuss at all a return to a process where we separate out the trustees and the mission council?
We did not. We did not take up any governance issues.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks so much.
For clarity's sake for everybody, because it took me a little bit to get my head around it. The Board of Trustees and the Mission Council are identical in their membership. And it just depends on which role that group is conducting at any time. So if they are doing Mission Council work, the Joel, in this case, currently would be moderating. If it is trustees issue, then currently Webb Moore would be the one that would be moderating as the chair of the trustees.
And if I recall, that's an action of Presbytery within the last 5 or 6 years.
That they are synonymous.
Yeah, I mean, that's a Presbytery action, and we made that change to the manual several years ago.
Yeah. And there are some governance issues that we did see. For instance, in our bylaws, it talks about the Communications and Coordinating Committee. I think the bylaws names some committees that we know, which is now the Mission Council. And so there is some work to be done both on our bylaws and our operations manual. But anything that was outside of the financial part, our committee said, "Oh, that's important," but that's outside of our work, which we were glad to not have to try and tackle governance as well.
Carrie, I saw your hand for a little while. Would you like to share or jump in?
Well, I just was going to say it doesn't really matter, but having one of the models for incorporating congregations includes the model that the session and the trustees are one. Other models of trustees and the session members are separate. Generally speaking, I think we've encouraged most congregations to have session and trustees be the same individuals, and then they conduct the needed business of the institution separately. And annually, there at least has to be one annual meeting of a congregational trustee board per year to maintain that status. So I'm not sure if that's the reasoning behind the model you're using now, but it is a model that we promote on our own website.
Yeah, and I shouldn't get into this, but the presbyteries, the corporation is a corporation of one. So while it has the trustees as a part of as Mission Council being the same, the corporation isn't the same. Who is the corporation? But that's in our bylaws, and that's governance. So we didn't touch it.
Gordon, I see you. I see your hand.
Just, I don't want to nitpick too much on this, but there is a third option, Carrie, which Chester did when we studied incorporation a number of years ago. And that is a blended approach where some of the session serve on the Board of Trustees, but also membership at large. And given the recent past of the history, and this is not for tonight really, but it might be something to reconsider, that there's a larger pool than simply the Mission Council, which the same individuals, whether they're wearing one hat or another, are making a lot of different decisions for the body.
Thanks for this conversation. Do we have other questions or points of conversation related to the Special Finance Team report and recommendations? John Garrett, are you trying to speak?
There we go. Will it be a review of the motions and what exactly they mean?
Yes. I hope you saw, I think it's on page of the report. Get up to it. In the report, before the policy, there's two motions, three motions for consideration. And then below those, John, are our kind of excursus on what the motions are mean and why we're recommending them. I believe But Josh, maybe you want to speak to the consent agenda for motion number 1. I can.
I let me discern that. If you would speak to that, David.
I'd be glad to. So the committee did reach out to the board of trustees on a couple of these issues because we just wanted to have clarity. But one concern we had is that the bylaws call for an audit, a financial audit. And that is different than a financial review. The Presbytery conducted financial audits up until 2018, I believe. But at least the last 5 years or more, the Presbytery has been doing the financial review, which is not at the same nor as much rigor as an audit. And so what we wanted the trustees to help us think about is, are we out of alignment with our bylaws, and should we return to that? Or do we want to continue with a review and amend the bylaws? Trustees recommended amending the bylaws, which we were happy. We just wanted our policy to be in alignment with the bylaws. And so the first motion that is there is speaking to that. That motion is going to come, I believe, in the consent agenda. And if it comes off the consent agenda, the Board of Trustees will have that conversation with the Presbytery. Essentially, for us, it's motion number 2. That is this amend and restatement. And there's on page 5 is a discussion about that explanation.
And just, for clarity's sake, we'll the special finance team will make a brief presentation at the meeting, and then there'll be time for discussion and action. So there will be, at the meeting, there will be some overview, presentation, highlights. But we wanted these listening sessions to have some of these really rich and deep and getting in the weeds kind of conversations that are not always possible or advisable at a Presbytery meeting. So hopefully that helps with the procedural part. And John, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, on this issue, a financial review is not the same as an audit, but my interpretation of an audit done by a CPA firm detects operations as well as, and may stumble onto fraud. Would a review do the same thing?
A review, it might. A financial review, it provides this kind of limited assurance, whereas the audit is just really rigorous. And it has testing and verification. The audit does. The financial review, it doesn't have that detailed kind of testing. And it doesn't give an auditor's opinion in the same kind of way. This is for multiple reasons, but it was one thing years ago. It was a cost issue for our smaller congregations, requiring them to have audits. So we moved to the financial review.
And the Book of Order only requires a financial review. It does not require an audit.
The audit.
So this, this practice is in line with the Book of Order. Carrie, I see your hand. I don't want to cut this conversation off, though, or if you're planning to speak to this. John, has that?
My only suggestion is, coming from being a layman in accounting and audits, I think the Presbytery ought to be advised the difference between the two when the discussion has an opportunity to respond. That's a suggestion, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some good information in the report from the task force on that difference. I hope folks will read it. Um,
Yeah.
but I do think that that would, if that is pulled from the consent agenda, I think you've hit the nail on the head. There needs to be some clarity about that. So
Yes.
thank you.
I think David's correct. The financial charge is a lot heavier for an audit than it is for review.
Carrie, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, and a little bit different, and I apologize, I came in late, so I missed some of the beginning of the Q&A time. The one thing I've noticed that complicates our discussions when we're looking at, for David, like the different funds, what's investment, what is designated, what is restricted, all those things. I mean, we have been living where Cindy provides two separate tables of all the accounts, which I know you've seen, and they're listed as restricted, or I forget the right titles. But I'm not sure if it's possible. It would be beneficial, I think, to have access to those tables. So then when someone is bringing up an example, like when John was talking about the new worshiping committee question, that was what I call on page 2. That wasn't the chart that kept the money that was garnered, that makes up the bulk of the $4 million. That was on a separate page, if you will, and was handled differently. And then also on those reports, you have the list for all the properties we're currently holding. And sometimes it's easy to see those numbers and get confused. But I think it might clear up things, maybe, if they can at least go back to the old chart and say, I'm talking about, and name whatever fund they're talking about. Because there'll be people focusing in on specific funds necessarily and confusing them with something else. Because there are, as alluded to, there's 2 full charts of funds or accounts around. So if the presenters have that there, or if we maybe ask our technology people if they can have one they could throw up on the board in the meeting, I think would be helpful.
Thanks for that suggestion. I really appreciate the conversation we've had. I know we have a little bit more time, but I'm not seeing any hands raised here. And so are there any other topics that we want to touch on this evening? Or are we finding ourselves pretty well informed?
Well, I have gratitude that you all would take an evening to come and think about these things in faithfulness and towards the presbytery. And I'm encouraged by the depth at which you've engaged the policy and by your very thoughtful questions. So thank you.
And David, thank you. I know you're hard at work this week on a mission trip. So
Yeah.
For finding a place to plug in and be with us.
Yeah, it worked better than I thought it was going to work when I first tried to get on. We are down here with University Presbyterian Church out of Chapel Hill. We have 13 volunteers that are building a house in Western North Carolina, Old Fort, the Camp Greer. If folks have been or know of Camp Greer, Presbyterian camp, their maintenance man lost and his wife everything. And so we have raised funds and are framing this week. And so I got to tell you, I'm having an awful lot of fun being in the mountains with a nailer in my hand. So it is a good thing.
Oh, that's lovely. Carrie, I'm going to put you on the spot. Would you mind closing us in prayer?
Oh, so I'm late and I get sent to the corner.
Those are the rules. I didn't make the rules.
Okay.
So
Okay. Well, as long as you didn't make the rules, I'm fine with that. That's good. All right, first off, again, thank you all for being here. And again, appreciation, David, and for the finance team that have done a lot of the hard work and not a, so I appreciate that. So let's close with a word of prayer. Loving God, we just ask that you will sometimes open our minds up bigger than what we think they can go. We come with strong feelings and we come out of compassion and care for the thing that we call our version of the church. And so we work hard to support that church that we know. It is hopeful that in the process that we shall begin to learn what the true church is about, that the Spirit will be moving among us. And we see that when we put our minds and our efforts together and work as a group, perhaps we become more approximating the church that you have in mind for us all. So guide us into this evening. Let those who had questions, let those have been answered, or at least given a hint of ways to go. Let us take stock of the fact that we are dealing with your blessings. There is nothing in our so-called possession that we earned. It's not ours. It's yours. And you've told us that every blessing that comes our way, we are the ones who are to take it to the rightful owners. And we are not the rightful owners of the blessings you have given us. They belong to someone else. Help us to be the courier, the bringer of the good news to those others beyond our vision. Let us be the good stewards we all want to be. And more than that, let us make sure that we bring honor and support and love and care, and compassion and grace and patience with those that we call brothers and sisters. So my prayer is that you grant us a restful evening and a good night's sleep. And if it is your desire that we wake up come the morning, let us go out into the world joyful and happy and with purpose, knowing we have blessings for the world and we wish to deliver them. Let us deliver those to each person that we meet in every day, in every way. We pray this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you.
All right.